All right, good evening, everybody. It's BC Birdman, and I thought for tonight I would do just a short video here on how I use Lightroom to do a little bit of post on my images. Now, just to just put it out there, I do have Photoshop, and I could go into doing layer masks and things like that, but I'm not. With my bird photos, I try to keep them as close to the way I took them as I possibly can. Now, in certain situations, I would prefer not to crop when I don't have to, but sometimes cropping is essential to just get a little bit closer and just make a better image. The reason that I don't like to crop all the time is because you are removing pixels from the overall final image. But in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to crop in wildlife images, but birds, seeing how they're always trying to get as far from you as possible, and they do not cooperate at all. Cropping sometimes is essential. With this image that you see ahead of you, this was just the other day. It's a great blue heron in the fresh white snow in the background. So here, you just expose for the bird. And then, you don't have to contend with the background at all. But I'll show you what I do with my images, and then, now I'm no guru. I'm not saying that this is the way it has to be done. This is the way that I do it. And I'm just making a video of it just so if somebody got Lightroom and they need a little help, you can maybe follow some of the ideas that I have. But believe me, I am not the greatest editor of all time, so just take from it what you will, and that's that. So without any further intro, let's get started. So what I'll do with this image here is I zoom in right away, first of all, just to see how my sharpness around the eye and things like that, and this is looking pretty good to me. So what I'll do is, at this point, now this is an example where I would like to crop in a little bit. So I will take my crop, and instead of using the bringing it down like this, I tend to draw a square the way I like my image to look. So I will come in like this, and then I like to, in this case, I'm going to use the rule of thirds. I'm going to come up, I'm going to go over a bit, and I'm going to try to put him right here. Not all the way, I'm not going to bring him all the way to this 1/3. I'm going to kind of put it just, not dead center, but just a little bit to the right of dead center. And from there, I'll just go like this. And I like the look of that there. Now what I'm going to do is go up here. So first off, starting with Lightroom, I like to use it's broken down like this. So you have your temperature, tint, and then I can work with the exposure, contrast, highlight, shadows, whites, blacks, and then after that's presence, which is clarity, vibrance, and saturation. Now keep in mind, you don't want to do massive alterations here, because every little move on those sliders that you make, you're adding noise to your final image. So keep that in mind, that a little bit goes a long ways. Starting with exposure, I like the way I have this image exposed, and always keep your histogram in mind here. But what I would do is just a little bit, I would add a little bit just in on the shadows right here. I'd back off my highlights a little bit, and what that's going to do is allow some of this blasting white light here. It's just going to make it softer and easier on the eye. Same as with the whites, I could even back them off a little bit. And a good thing to do is just play around with them, like go to the extreme, see what it looks like. Like when I was learning, I would go to the extreme just to see what effect it was having, and then obviously you can back it off or add. But like I said, don't go too extreme with these, because you're ultimately trying to get it as best as you can in the camera, and then using Lightroom or whatever post-processing software that you have to just tweak it a little bit and get it ready for taking it to print. I print all my images that are worthwhile getting printed. With blacks, I like to throw my blacks in. Now I'm big into contrast. I like punchy images. Now with contrast, you notice that darkens it again a little bit. So I'm just going to add a little bit of that, the D shadow, I guess you'll call it. Now I think I'm going to add a little bit of the white back in, just because in the way it was that day, it was very bright. I'm just going to tone off those highlights though, just because with the white, the highlights together, it just seems to be a little bit much. Clarity, I wouldn't go higher. I go to about 10 on clarity with this image. And then saturation, maybe, I tend not to go higher than 15 on saturation, no matter what image. Because like I said, I try to keep it minimal, very minimal, the use of the sliders. Because again, I like to come down here into the color sliders. Down here, now this is the HSL, and what I'll do here is I can go in now and I can take a look. Now the great blue heron, knowing that they have a really yellow eye, I know that I want to just bring in some of my increase the yellows a bit, and then increase the brightness or the luminance of the yellows. And then of course I'm going to increase a little bit of the saturation of the orange for in the beak right here. And then I'm going to increase the brightness of that orange as well. So when I back out, it just gives a little bit more, it's more visible now. It's with the brightness of the background, it can take away from the luminance or the saturation of the color in the foreground, I believe. So that's what I do. Now with the snow, there's a little bit of blue in the shadows and in the snow, because that's just the way it is. So what I like to do, I can either go with the brightness of the blue and take away, or I can go with the darkness of the blue. And in this situation, because it's a blue heron as well, see, as I go to the left of the luminance blue, I'm going to darken it or increase the shadow and the depth of that blue. And when we did that, did you notice how much more of the image came like visible? Looking in here now, you can see that this here is a hill. The background falls off, and he's standing on a bluff that's higher than the background there. So you have your foreground, your middle ground, your background. So that's what just moving that one slider can do, and that was amazing. So that's another thing I do. Knowing that that's the way it looked when I took the photo, it's a great way to separate your subject and the foreground and the background when you're dealing with things like snow, or really, say you weren't using a circular polarizer with light reflecting on the water. So it's a great way to deal with that. So now that we have them standing out like that, sharpening, I do not use sharpening at all in Lightroom, so I'm going to just back that off a bit. Noise reduction, I'll just go to 5. And then I'm going to enable my lens corrections, and of course my color corrections, which will deal with any chromatic aberrations and things like that. And basically that's where I leave it at. I could go further. I could go into Photoshop, or if I was dealing with a bird that had like a branch going through the background, I could make a choice to remove that branch. But like I said, I like to keep things the way it was when I shot it. And if I don't like a branch at the time of shooting it, I'll kind of, if it's possible, I'll move to try to get the bird the way I want to shoot it, at the scene where I'm taking the picture, instead of having to use Photoshop and that. So this just gives you guys an idea of how I go about post-processing my images, and this is what I do with all of them. So as you can see, I don't put a lot of special effects, or it's not graphic design, it's photography. So that's my belief, and so there you have it. That's just a look inside the editing process that I take, and it's by no ways the absolute way it should be. And with that, PC Birdman signing off.